Hello, and thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about the book Mother's Instinct by Barbara Abel, originally published in 2012 in Belgium. The author is from Belgium, and the original title actually translates to Behind the Hatred. But for the English translation, they switched the title to Mother's Instinct. And I'm comparing it with the movie also titled Mother's Instinct, which is directed by Benoit Delhomme, and it was released in America in 2024. And this is actually the second adaptation that has been made, because in 2018, Belgium made their own adaptation. But I have not yet seen that movie. I couldn't find where to stream it, so if you do know where to stream it, let me know. But also, if you have seen it, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, because I am curious how it relates, how it compares to both book and newer movie. I did see, it seems like there's a number of things that the Belgian movie changed that this movie also kept. For example, the names are different from book to movie, and so the new movie uses the names that the 2018 movie had, whereas in the book they have totally different names. But then also the book takes place in present day, whereas the 2018 movie takes place in the early 1960s, and then this version also takes place in the early 1960s. So I'm curious if this is considered more of a remake of the 2018 movie, or if it's considered like a mix of both book and 2018 movie. When it's an adaptation that has already been made, it's always interesting to see what the second adaptation is like and what it does or doesn't take from the original adaptation compared with the book. But anyway, I haven't seen the original adaptation, so let me know what it is like down in the comments. But before I talk about Celine and Alice, I first need to talk about Ana Luisa. And no, Ana Luisa is not a character in Mother's Instinct. Ana Luisa is a jewelry brand who I am so happy to be partnering with for this video. I first heard of this jewelry brand a few years ago. It was another book YouTuber. She was working with Ana Luisa. And so ever since then, I have been such a fan of their jewelry. And so it is so exciting that now I get to be the YouTuber who is partnering with them. So I am wearing these pearl drop earrings right here, which I absolutely love. And their jewelry, it's so high quality and long lasting while still being affordable. So you should definitely check them out using that link. And they have such a variety of designs. For this video, wearing these pearl earrings made sense because in the movie, Celine is gifted pearls by Alice. And in these videos, I like to wear things that relate to the book and movie I'm talking about and just be on theme. And so yeah, these pearl earrings I thought fit the theme of Mother's Instinct. And yeah, whether you want to buy this jewelry as a gift for someone else or if you just want to buy it for yourself, I highly recommend you check them out. They just have such amazing pieces and they're just so gorgeous, and it's just a guarantee that when you're wearing Ana Luisa, whatever outfit you have, it will just enhance your overall look. And again, make sure you use my link down in the description. It is an affiliate link, so it benefits me. So thank you so much to Ana Luisa for wanting to partner with me. Again, this is so exciting as someone who has been a fan of theirs for a few years now. So yeah, click that link in the description and check out Ana Luisa for yourself. But from here on out, I'm going to be getting into the details of the plot, which means there will be spoilers going forward. And so, like I said, the characters have different names from book to movie, including, the wives, the husbands, they all have different names. But I'm going to just refer to them by their movie names. So Celine is the one whose son dies, and she is played by Anne Hathaway. And then Alice is our other main character, and she is played by Jessica Chastain. And in the movie, we don't really know how long they've been friends, but in the book, we get much more of a backstory. Like the book starts out before they even have children, and we learn about this friendship between these two couples. And they're friends before they have kids, and then they happen to get pregnant around the same time. And so their sons are like brothers. And so we just see the formation of this relationship. And we also see that soon after their sons are born, Alice and her husband ask Celine to be their son's godmother. And the godfather is actually this other guy, because in the book, Simon is Alice's husband. And in the book, he is a former convict, and he is also in AA. And so his sponsor is this older guy named Ernest, who is like a father to him. And so Ernest is the godfather, Celine is the godmother. And we do not have this in the movie. And in the movie, there is no Ernest. Instead, like the other older person they have in this movie is Simon's mother. And so she is an older person who has heart issues. And so she takes medication for her heart. But yeah, even though we don't get the backstory of their friendship in the movie, basically in both book and movie, it is these two couples who each have a son who is the same age, and they are all just best friends. And one side plot that the movie does not have involves Celine and her husband Damian and how they met. So Damian Damian, he had a friend who was a doctor, and he prescribed this medication to a pregnant woman. However, after the fact, he realizes that he made a mistake and that medication could harm her baby, and turns out it does harm her baby, and she loses her baby. And so the doctor is going to get in a lot of trouble. And so he asks Damian to find this pharmacist and find a way for him to get access to the prescriptions. And he has written a new one with the correct medication. So he wants Damian to switch out the papers. And so when they investigate, they will see his prescription and they'll see that he prescribed her the right safe medication, but the pharmacist is the one who messed up and gave the wrong medication. So the pharmacist will be to blame for the lady losing her child. And so this is what happens. The doctor, he gets away with it. The pharmacist, her life is ruined. And guess who that pharmacist was? It was Celine. So Damian ruins her career. He kind of ruins her life in many ways. She thinks she is to blame for this woman losing her baby. And Damian, he falls in love with her in the process. But I also think he just feels so guilty, right? And so he helps her get back on her feet. And then the two of them end up getting married. And he never tells her about this. So she is just kept in the dark. And so their relationship is just started on this huge deception. But Damian does confide this to Simon. So he tells Simon the whole backstory. However, Simon does not say anything to Celine or Alice. He just keeps it to himself. And then one day he is a taxi driver, and one day he gives a ride to this doctor, and the doctor is going to Damian and Celine's house. And so he drops him off there, and then he drives away. And then like the next day or something, very soon after, he sees this guy's name in the newspaper that he has committed suicide. And we find out later that Celine had talked to this man. This man had showed up at their home, and he had told Celine everything. And turns out he had told her, he had confessed all of this to her because he was dying and he just wanted to get it off his chest. And so then rather than let this illness kill him, he confessed to Celine, and then he went and committed suicide. And initially I was thinking we were going to learn that Celine killed him and made it look like a suicide, but I don't think that's the case. I think he just really did commit suicide on his own. But yeah, after he tells this to Celine, Celine does not talk to Damian about it. She just keeps it to herself, and she doesn't bring it up to him until after their son has died. And at this point, Damian blames her for Max's death. And so while he is upset at her about Max's death, she then brings up like, well, I know the truth about how we met and why we met. And he had no idea she knew. And so then they're in this weird situation where they each can hold something over the other. And so basically they're like, you know what, let's just move past it and let's just go forward together and forgive each other, essentially. And yeah, this whole side plot, it was just a bit too convoluted, and I didn't understand the point of it. Like, if you've read the book, let me know. Do you think Celine did kill this man? It seems heavily implied that he really did just commit suicide. So again, yeah, that storyline just seemed kind of pointless, and the movie does not have it, which I think was a smart cut. But in both, one day Max is homesick and Alice is in her backyard when she sees Max dangerously close to falling out of his window, and she tries to save him. However, she does not get there in time, and Max falls to his death. And in the movie, they had a deck outside of where his window was, and he was on top of the railing, I guess, is that what you call it? Just whatever it is around a deck, like a fence, essentially. He is standing on top of that to hang a birdhouse when then he falls. Whereas in the book, he was sick and it was really hot inside. And so he opened the window and he had like the top half of his body out of the window to try to cool down. And he just put himself too far out to the point that he eventually fell and died. And after his death, Celine is very cold to Alice because she blames Alice, because she's like, you could have done more to save him and you didn't. In the book, this is like more of a thing because Alice and her husband go over to see Celine and her husband, and they straight up say like, it's your fault he died and that's why we're not talking to you. However, over time, Celine eventually realizes that she is being unfair to Alice, and so they make amends, and she tells her, you know, I was wrong to blame you, I'm sorry. However, once Damian and Celine realize that they can't really blame Alice, this is when Damian instead blames Celine, and he's like, it's your fault. His window was open. If you had closed it, then he wouldn't have tried to, you know, get out there and cool down. And so when he is upset at her, blaming her for Max's death, is when in the book she brings up, you know, their past and how she knows what he did with the prescriptions. And also just in general, in the book, Celine and her husband were more of a united front. Whereas in the movie, Celine's husband, he just kind of becomes super depressed and is a recluse and doesn't want to talk to people. And he spends a lot of time in this room just kind of like drinking and not doing anything. So their dynamics was very different from book to movie. But yeah, In the book, they were like together blaming Alice. However, over time, they realize that that's not fair and they're being unfair to Alice. And so then they tell her that they're sorry and they want to make amends and be friends again. Whereas in the movie, it's really just Celine. Celine is the one who blames Alice. And then she on her own is like, you know what? I'm being unfair. You're not to blame, essentially. But after Max's death, Alice then does not feel safe having her son Theo spend time with Celine, which seemed kind of messed up. Like, just because her son died doesn't mean that she can no longer be trusted around children. That seems so unfair and so judgmental. So I thought she was being a bit extreme initially in that sense, like as if it's a disease and if Celine touches her son will therefore die too or something. Like, no, yeah, she left the window open, but you're being a bit over the top about this. And in the movie, we kind of see this too, that she is uncomfortable with her son being around Celine. But I don't know if she's worried so much about his own safety as much as she is just, Celine is just so fragile and just not in a good place mentally and emotionally. And so in the movie, it seemed like that was why she didn't like her son being around Celine. However, she feels bad for Celine, so she does let Theo be around her to a limited extent. And in both book and movie, at one point, Theo is with Celine at Celine's house. Alice is in her own backyard. When then she sees that Theo is on that same area where Max was when he died. And so she freaks out. She gets over to the backyard very quickly and tells Theo to get to safety. However, Celine shows up and she's like, whoa, it's fine, calm down, what are you talking about? And Alice is just freaking out, being like, how can you have him right there where Max died? And so she gets very upset. And in the movie, Alice suspects, I think she had him there on purpose. I think she was testing me to see if I would get there sooner than I did with her own son. And in the book, we find out that this is true. Celine was testing Alice, but it's so unfair because Alice, she has spent many a sleepless night just going over that day thinking, how could I have saved Max? How could I have been faster? And so when her own son is there, yeah, it's her own son, but also she's been stewing about this for days. And so of course she's able to get there faster because she is more mentally prepared for it because she has been thinking about it, over and over again. So in the book, this was very unfair of Celine to judge Alice for getting there quicker when it was her own son. But then we have Theo's birthday party, and in both book and movie, Celine and her husband are invited. In the movie, I guess it's just Celine who is invited, but in the book, both parents are invited. However, neither of them can just bear being part of it. So in the book, they stay home and they do not go to the party. However, Ernest is there, of course, but then he leaves early, and then later he is found on the same street where they live, and he is dead. And at first it seems like he died from heart issues, but later we find out that there was foul play at hand. Whereas in the movie, Celine does go to Theo's birthday party, and the older character here, like I said, is Simon's mom, the grandma to Theo. And again, she has heart issues and she's always taking medication, but then she ends up having a heart attack at the birthday party, and they do an autopsy and the medication was not in her system. And Alice is like, what? She was constantly taking those pills. How could it not have been in her system? And so right away, Alice thinks that there is something fishy going on. And also during the birthday party in the movie, Simon's mom is talking to Celine, telling her that she shouldn't be there because her sadness over her son's death is ruining Theo's day, his birthday celebration. And she was so messed up to Celine in this scene. And this was not in the book because, again, Celine wasn't even at the party. And also this grandma character did not even exist in the book. And then later, Damian and Celine invite Alice and her family over for dinner. And in the movie, Theo is hungry because dinner isn't ready yet. And so Celine tells him oh, go in the kitchen and find something. And in the movie, Theo is allergic to peanuts. And so he finds this box of peanut butter cookies and he eats one. He starts having a reaction and he is rushed to the hospital. And Alice gets upset at Celine, being like, you wanted him to go to the kitchen to get a snack because you knew you had put these cookies out for him. You wanted to hurt him. Whereas in the book, it's a little different because someone else asks Theo to go into the kitchen for something. And in the book, Celine was into herbal remedies. And so she has some sort of herbal something in a dish and it looks like brown sugar. And so Theo goes into the kitchen and then he comes back out and he is sick and they call the ambulance. And Celine right away, she tells the ambulance workers that he probably has this herb in his system, which can be deadly. And so she's like, he probably ate that poison. You need to pump his stomach. And so she's just telling the ambulance workers what to do. And so Alice is like, what? How can she already suspect just right away? She suspects what happens. That is suspicious. And so she thinks that Alice put some of this poison on top of these chips that she specifically gave to Theo. And Alice is like, no, I didn't put them on the chips. I think he got into it himself when he saw the dish in my kitchen. But either way, Alice now just really does not trust Celine, and she feels like Celine is trying to harm Theo. Which in the book, it made more sense that she is suspicious of Celine because, again, she thinks Celine put this substance on these chips that she then gave to Theo. Like, that makes more sense that she's like, she tried to kill him. Whereas in the movie, like, Theo, of his own accord, ate the peanut butter cookies. So yeah, maybe Celine technically should have put the peanut butter cookies in the cupboard, but he chose to eat them. So I feel like you can't say that Celine intended for him to die because, he did it of his own accord, essentially. And in the book, we find out that she did not poison the chips, and we find out that Theo really did eat the substance on his own. And so in both situations, Celine really isn't to blame. Like, yeah, she shouldn't have had that poisonous substance out. But regardless, in both book and movie, Alice just gets more and more paranoid, feeling like her son is not safe and Celine is trying to harm them. And she also suspects that Celine killed Ernest / the grandmother. And Simon is just at his wit's end because he thinks Alice is just being delusional. And in the book, he's like, you know what? If you feel like your son is at this much risk, then why don't we move? If you think Celine is trying to do something, then we should not be neighbors with her. However, in the book, Alice, she's like, no, like her parents have died in both book and movie. And in the book, she's like, no, I was raised in this home. Like after the death of my parents, I can't bear the thought of living somewhere else. But that's so ridiculous. Like, even with that in mind, if you think your son's life is at risk, if you think this woman is murdering people in your family or, people you love, having this connection to your parents is not enough reason to stay. That made no sense. And in this book, there are multiple times characters make choices that just didn't make sense. And this was one of them. Like, it made no sense that she would be unwilling to move. It was just, if you think it's that serious, then you need to move, right? It's a pretty simple answer. And so that was frustrating in the book. But the movie fixes this because in the movie, she tells her husband, I want to move. And at first the husband is hesitant, but then eventually he does come around. And so they do plan to move. And by the time they make this choice, Celine and Alice have kind of made amends. Obviously their relationship is not the same as it was, but they're doing better. And so Alice tells Celine that she is going to be moving in 2 weeks. In the book, there is this brief section where we read Theo's thoughts and how he is feeling based on all the drama going on around him. And we kind of see this play out in the film when he runs over to Celine's house and he stands on the ledge of the deck and both of the moms are freaking out, being like, oh my gosh, like come back here. But he tells them, you told me that Max and my grandma are in a better place. And I want to go to a better place because I hate my life right now, essentially. Because, Celine and Alice is just so tense and they're at odds and there's all of this arguing and yelling. And so it is affecting him. And so in his innocence, he's like, I want to go to a better place. So I want to fall off this ledge. That way I can be with Max and grandma. And so I did really like that scene in the movie. But yeah, that was not in the book. Instead, in the book, the equivalent of that scene is just this section where we get Theo's thoughts, essentially. And the reason they make amends before Alice tells Celine they're moving, it's because Theo threatens to jump. And so that kind of brings them together. And they're like, we promise we won't fight anymore because they see what it's doing to Theo. And then to talk about the book ending. So in the book, Alice and her husband are still butting heads about her overreacting to Celine and her paranoia. And the husband is just being like, oh, this isn't as big of a deal as you think. You're going crazy, kind of a thing. And so they're having an argument and Alice storms off and she leaves. And while she is gone, the cops show up because they have found out that someone murdered him. And so they want to question Simon about this murder. And so Simon, he doesn't want to take his son with him to the police station. And so his only option is to have Celine and her husband watch Theo. And so he takes Theo over there and then he himself goes to the police station. And then in the book, this whole time, Celine and her husband have been conspiring against Alice and Simon in the end goal that they can get Theo. And so when he drops Theo off with them, they're like, this is our opportunity. We're never going to get a chance like this again. And so they wait for Alice to return. She doesn't have her key, so she's knocking on the door. When then Celine comes outside and she's like, hey, your husband and son, they packed a bag and they left. So they're not even here right now. And Alice is heartbroken, being like, oh, Like, because of our argument, he left. He took my son with him and he left. And so Celine gets Alice to come inside and she's like, you're gonna catch cold out here. And when Alice is inside Celine's house, they then drug her and then they take her body over to Alice's house. They make it look like she committed suicide. And then meanwhile, Simon, he's at the police station and he finds out basically that he was framed for the death of Ernest. And so he realizes this at the police station that like, oh my gosh, Alice was right. Celine can't be trusted. And so he hurries and rushes home and then he goes straight to Alice's house. However, Celine. Celine and her husband are prepared for Simon. And so as soon as he shows up, they drug him with like chloroform or something. And then they take his body back to his house and they make it look like he also committed suicide. And then the next morning they call the police being like, hey, our neighbors dropped their son off with us last night and neither one has returned to pick him up. And so the police go to Alice and Simon's house. They find their dead bodies. And then Celine and Damian get Theo. The end. Whereas in the movie, the ending is a little different. So Alice tells Celine that they are moving and she goes inside and she tells her husband. And in the movie, ever since Max's death, Damian has just been very distant and just very cold and he's been drinking more. And yeah, so when she tells them like, oh, they're moving, he's like, oh, well, it makes sense because you're just always hovering around Theo. You won't leave them alone. So like, it makes sense. They want to move now. And so he's just very cold to her. And she, of course, is very hurt by this. And then in the movie, she drugs her own husband and then she makes it look like he committed suicide. And so the next morning she calls the police that her husband has committed suicide. And then Alice, again, they have made amends with Celine. And so Alice now feels so bad for Celine. So she's like, oh, like come and stay with us. You can stay with us. And so Celine is at Alice's house. And then that evening, Alice tells her husband, like, I'm going to go over to Celine's house because she's been wearing the same clothes all day. Like I should get her a new pair of clothing. And so she goes over to Celine's house. And while she is there, because Damian had worked in pharmaceuticals, and so he has this like pill cabinet. And so she finds the key and she opens it and she sees that the chloroform is missing. And so she's like, oh my gosh, like Celine took the chloroform. And so she goes over there. And when she is back home, she sees that her husband has been drugged and is passed out. And she also sees that Celine used chloroform to knock Theo out. And so she and Celine have like a tussle. However, ultimately Celine is able to use the chloroform on Alice too. And then she has Alice downstairs with her husband. She turns on the gas so that they will die of carbon monoxide poisoning. And then in the end, she gets custody of Theo. And that is how the movie ends. And so as far as book versus movie goes, in the book, I found the two female main characters, they were indistinguishable. Like they have different backstories, but their personalities and like the way the book was written, I had such a hard time keeping these two characters in line, like which did and said what, because they were poorly written in my mind and they were just so similar. Like they didn't feel real enough that I was able to distinguish who was who. Like I've read books that have like 5 main characters who are all female, but because the author makes them so distinct and feel so real, I never get them confused. Whereas here, it's just 2 characters and yet they were indistinguishable and I would get them mixed up. And so again, I just think it was poor writing. And then also their friendship, I just didn't feel the friendship. Like we are just told like, oh, they meet and they become instant friends, but I didn't feel the friendship and I wasn't believing the friendship. And then again, certain characters, specifically Alice, she made so many choices that just didn't make sense. And I also would say that once Ernest dies, it was very clear where the story was going to go. And so from then on, I suspected what would happen and I was right. And so while we do have some tense moments at the same time, it was pretty predictable. A book like this, it's a thriller, right? And so it's one that I should just be like, wow, I can't wait to just finish this and find out how it ends. I can't put it down. But with this one, it took me like a week to read because I wasn't invested and I wasn't on the edge of my seat and I didn't really care how things ended. And so yeah, it wasn't the page turner that it should have been. And then I felt that like the character development was very lackluster. But just because I didn't like it, I know on Goodreads, there's a lot of people who did really like this book. So I would love to hear what you think of it, whether you agree with me or disagree with me. I want to hear your thoughts, so share down below. But then as far as the movie goes, the movie They made a few changes, which I've already gotten into, but none of the changes were ones I was upset by. Like, I was on board with every change they made, and I think they improved the story, actually. And of course, it doesn't hurt that we have two amazing leads, Jessica Chastain and Anne Hathaway. I love them both, and they deliver solid performances. Although I will say, one change I actually didn't like was the thing with Theo being poisoned / having an allergic reaction. I liked it better in the book, because in the book, it's not clear cut. It's like, wait, was she trying to poison him? Was she not? And in the book, it almost doesn't make sense, because it's like, why would she poison him though? Because, you know, what did Theo ever do wrong, you know? And I get Alice is like, she wants to get back at me by killing my son. But in my mind, I was thinking that Alice wanted Theo. So I was like, why would she try to kill him? I thought she was gonna make it seem like Celine was a negligent mother and that's how she would try to get him or something. But basically it turned out Theo ate the stuff on his own and Celine really wasn't to blame. And so I preferred that to the movie, where in the movie, like, I don't see why Celine would be blamed at all. Like, yeah, she had these peanut butter cookies out, but it seemed like Theo was old enough that he should know to stay away from the peanut butter cookies. So I kind of liked it better in the book, where it was just more ambiguous as far as what actually happened. And speaking of ambiguity, I realized too, the movie, I don't think they ever quite say what happened with the grandma. Like, did Celine for sure mess with her pills? It seems like it's heavily implied that she did mess with her pills, like with the pill box disappearing and then the husband finds it. So that seemed like something was going on. But I feel like we never find out for sure, whereas in the book, we know without a doubt that Celine killed Ernest. But yeah, anyway, when it comes to book versus movie, I did prefer the movie. I got much more enjoyment watching this movie than I got from reading the book. And the movie is also only like an hour and a half. So I have nothing against long movies as long as they're paced well. And yet, having said that, I do appreciate a 90-minute movie. You know, there's something nice about that. So I did like that they didn't meander and waste time. They just really got right to it. And then again, the performances were amazing. And I just really love seeing an unhinged Anne Hathaway. So I'm such a big fan of her. So yeah, she and Jessica Chastain gave great performances. And so I would not recommend the book, but I would recommend the movie. I think it is worth watching. And I would also recommend Ana Luisa. So make sure you click that link in my description and check out their jewelry, get some for yourself. They just make such beautiful pieces, again, that are just so high quality and long lasting. They are worth the money and you are sure to love it. Or if you buy it as a gift, whoever you give it to, they will also love it. So anyway, check out Ana Luisa. And then also for any Anne Hathaway fans, I will link to my book versus movie that I did for Eileen, which also features an unhinged Anne Hathaway performance. But then also for any Hathaway fans, my Devil Wears Prada book versus movie will be out very soon on Monday, so get excited for that. And again, thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.